My husband is currently staring at a concrete wall in a state prison. His pregnant mistress is wandering the streets of Atlanta with nothing. And I am sitting in the luxury mansion they tried to steal from me. They called me. They thought I was just a naive wife with a rich father for 3 years. They plotted to hijack my inheritance. They even toasted to my ruin while I was sleeping in the next room. But greed makes people blind. They signed the documents. They took the bait. They didn't realize that every piece of good news I gave them was actually a nail in their coffin. They walked right into the cage I built. This is the story of how I liquidated their lives without ever raising my voice. Watch closely, because today you will learn the true price of betrayal. The silence in a Buckhead mansion is heavy. It smells like expensive beeswax polish and fresh lilies. But today, the silence felt like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. I stood by the grand mahogany doors. The air was thick with the scent of Trevante's departure. Sandalwood cologne, a hint of expensive leather, and the faint, lingering smell of a lie. He had just kissed my forehead. His lips were cold. He told me he loved me. He told me his mother was dying in a small town down south. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. I felt sorry for him. I felt like a protective wife. I didn't know I was waving goodbye to a monster. I walked into the sunroom. The plantation shutters were partially closed. Thin strips of afternoon light cut across the Persian rug. They looked like golden bars. I felt trapped in my own home. My heart was heavy with a strange anxiety. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over his name. Trevante, my husband of 3 years. The man who promised to protect me. I just wanted to hear his voice one more time. I wanted to tell him to drive safely on those dark Georgia backroads. I pressed the call button. The ringing sound was rhythmic, boring, safe. He answered on the third ring. His voice was rushed. There was a strange background noise. The hum of a high-end engine. He said the signal was terrible. He said he had just reached the outskirts of Macon. He told me he had to go. He said he loved me. Then there was a click. Or there should have been a click. But the line stayed open. The timer on my screen kept moving. 1 second. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. I was about to press the red button. I thought it was just a glitch. A simple technical error. Then I heard it. The sound of a car door slamming. Not the sound of a rusted door in a rural driveway, but the sound of a luxury sedan closing with a heavy, expensive thud. My breath hitched. My chest felt tight, like a steel band was winding around my ribs. I heard his laugh. It wasn't the sad, morning laugh he gave me on the porch. It was a roar of triumph. It was a sound of liberation. Then a second voice joined in. A woman's voice, high, shrill, and terrifyingly familiar. It was Caliso, my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman I had known since college. She was laughing too. "Is she off the line?" she asked. Her voice sounded like a serrated blade. Trevante chuckled. "Yeah, the simple-minded woman is probably crying in her tea by now." He said. The room began to spin. The golden bars of light on the floor seemed to turn into fire. I sat down on the velvet sofa. My legs felt like water. I pressed the phone against my ear so hard it hurt. I didn't hang up. I couldn't hang up. I was witnessing the murder of my soul. "Just wait until that $1 million check from her daddy clears," Trevante said. His voice was full of utter contempt. "I am going to leave that simple-minded wife of mine with nothing. We are going to get married. We are going to raise this baby together." The word baby hit me like a physical blow. I felt a surge of nausea. I leaned over. My hand found the record button on the screen. My fingers were ice cold. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just watched the red timer record the evidence of my own execution. 40 seconds, 50 seconds, 60 seconds. In 1 minute. My entire reality had been liquidated. The man I loved was a predator. My best friend was carrying his child. And they were both waiting for my father to die. Or at least, waiting for his money to land in their greedy palms. I heard them talking about the mansion. They were already redecorating it in their minds. They talked about my sense of style. Boring, outdated, bougie. Calisto mocked my voice. She imitated the way I called his name. They were feasting on my life while I was still living it. I felt a cold, lethal rage beginning to wake up in the base of my spine. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. I looked at the grandfather clock in the hall. Its steady tick-tock sounded like a countdown. Trevante spoke again. He said he was sick of the performance. He was sick of my father's lectures on black excellence and business ethics. He was sick of pretending to be the perfect son-in-law. He called my father a fossil. He called me a stepping stone. Every word was a dagger. But I welcomed the pain. I wanted it to burn. I wanted to remember exactly how this felt. Because I knew, right then, that the Vianne they knew was dead. The woman who folded his laundry with love was gone. The woman who gave him her heart was buried under 60 seconds of audio. The line finally went dead. The silence returned to the house. But it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a war room. I looked at the phone. The recording was saved. I played it back once, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Hearing their laughter again made my skin crawl. It made my blood turn to ice. I walked to the mirror in the foyer. I looked at the woman in the reflection. Her eyes were different. They were sharp. They were hungry. I didn't call my friends. I didn't call the police. I didn't scream. I walked to my father's old study. The room smelled of old paper and expensive tobacco. I sat at his desk. I opened my laptop. I looked at the asset management files. Trevante thought he was playing a game of checkers. He thought I was the prize. He didn't realize. I am the daughter of a man who built empires. And I was about to show him exactly what happens when you try to steal from a matriarch. The first move was already forming in my mind. It was subtle. It was beautiful. It was a trap he would walk into with a smile on his face. Greed is a patient parasite. It lives in the dark corners of a man's soul. I watched it crawl behind my husband's eyes the moment I mentioned the money. The study was cold. The air smelled of old ink and my father's expensive Cuban cigars. I sat in his heavy leather chair, the same chair where he built an empire. I felt the cold weight of my wedding ring. It felt like a shackle. I twisted it around my finger until the skin turned red. I had a choice. I could confront Trevante now. I could scream and throw him out of my house. But that would be too easy. A man like that doesn't deserve a quick exit. He deserves a slow, calculated, total collapse. I picked up the landline. My father answered on the first ring. His voice was deep. It sounded like gravel over silk. He didn't ask why I was calling so late. He knew the tone of my breath. I played the recording for him. The study was silent, except for the sound of my husband's mocking laughter coming through the speaker. I heard my father's breathing change. It became slow, heavy, dangerous. He didn't erupt in anger. He didn't curse. He simply said one thing. We will let them hunt the ghost of a fortune. The plan was born in that silence. We would not cut him off. We would not block his access. We would do the opposite. We would feed his hunger. We would give him a reason to stay, a reason to dream, and a reason to spend money he did not have. My father promised to begin the fictitious liquidation of $1 million asset. It was a bait, a beautiful, shimmering hook. And Trevante was a very hungry fish. 2 days passed. The house felt like a tomb. I spent my time cleaning, organizing, acting the part of the grieving. Worried wife. I wore my softest silk robes. I kept the lights dim. I wanted the atmosphere to feel fragile. I wanted him to feel like he was the only strength I had left. When the garage door finally hummed, my heart didn't flutter. It froze. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood. He walked with a heavy, falsely tired gait. He entered the kitchen smelling of the outdoors, and a faint, floral scent that did not belong to me. Calisto's perfume. It was sweet cloying, like rotting fruit. I turned around and forced a smile. My face felt like a mask made of glass. One wrong move and it would shatter. He hugged me. His arms felt like snakes. He told me about Macon. He told me how his mother was struggling. He looked me in the eye and lied with the grace of a professional actor. I nodded. I offered him a glass of alkaline water. I touched his arm. My skin crawled. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I remembered the recording. I remembered the 60 seconds that changed my life. During dinner, the atmosphere was thick. I had prepared oxtails and butter beans. His favorite, the smell of the rich gravy filled the room. It should have been a scene of domestic bliss. But I was a hunter, and he was my prey. I waited until he was halfway through his meal. I watched him chew. I watched the way he looked at our expensive crystal glassware. He already felt like he owned it. I cleared my throat softly. Trevante, I said. My voice was steady. It was calm. My father called today. He stopped eating. The silver fork hovered in the air. He didn't look up immediately. He tried to act casual, but I saw the tension in his jaw. Oh yeah, he asked. What did the old man want? I leaned forward. The candlelight reflected in my eyes. He says the asset liquidation is moving faster than expected. The $1 million check should be ready within 10 days. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I watched his eyes. They didn't fill with relief. They filled with fire, pure, unadulterated greed. It was a physical transformation. His shoulders straightened. His fake mask of sadness evaporated. He tried to hide it. He tried to say something about how that would help us build our future. But he was already gone. He was already in that luxury sedan with Caliso. He was already raising a child that wasn't mine with my father's money. I told him there were documents to sign. I told him he needed to handle the change of ownership paperwork. I watched him swallow the lie. He didn't ask questions. Greed makes a man stupid. It makes him blind to the most obvious traps. He was so focused on the prize that he didn't see the cage door closing behind him. He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was sweaty. You're such a good wife, Vianne, he said. We're going to be so happy. I looked at him and smiled. I didn't say a word. I just felt the cold, hard truth of what was coming. I had given him the bait. He had taken it whole. Now all I had to do was lead him to the ledge. I watched him pull out his phone as soon as I left the room. He was itching to call her. He was itching to tell his mistress that the jackpot had landed. I walked up the stairs. My footsteps were silent on the carpet. I entered our bedroom and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I simply opened my drawer and took out a small black device. It was a GPS tracker. The next stage of the hunt was about to begin. I knew where he was going tomorrow, and I knew who he was going to see. He thought he was moving toward a life of luxury. He didn't realize he was moving toward a total absolute and very public destruction. The guest room smelled of white lilies and bleach. It was a beautiful, sterile tomb. I spent the morning preparing for the arrival of a woman who claimed she was dying. I fluffed the pillows. I smoothed the high thread count sheets. They were white, like a shroud. I placed a vase of fresh flowers on the nightstand. The petals were soft, cool to the touch. But the water in the vase was a lie, just like the woman coming to sleep in this bed. I stood by the window and watched the driveway. My hands were folded in front of me. My knuckles were white. The air in the mansion felt heavy, stagnant, like the moments before a hurricane. Then I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. A car was approaching. Not Travante's car, but a taxi. I watched as the door opened. Out stepped Eudora, my mother-in-law, the woman who was supposedly too weak to stand, the woman whose medical bills I had been paying for months. She wasn't wearing a hospital gown. She was wearing her Sunday best, a bright lavender suit, flashy gold jewelry that jingled with every movement. A silk hat perched perfectly on her head. She looked radiant. She looked healthy. She looked like a woman who had come to claim a kingdom. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The betrayal was a family affair. It wasn't just my husband. It was the woman who raised him. I opened the front door. The humid Georgia air rushed in. It smelled of rain and hot asphalt. Eudora stood there. Her eyes weren't filled with the pain of illness. They were sharp. They were scanning the facade of the mansion. She was calculating the value of the bricks, the height of the pillars, the cost of the landscaping. She looked at me. A fake smile spread across her face. It didn't reach her eyes, Vianne, baby. She cried out. Her voice was strong. It had no trace of a dying woman's rasp. She reached out and pulled me into a hug. She smelled of peppermint and cheap hairspray. Her jewelry felt cold against my neck. I hugged her back. I played my part. I told her how worried I was. I asked her about her heart, her lungs, her supposed frailty. She waved her hand dismissively. The Lord works in mysterious ways, she said. I felt a sudden strength. I just had to see my favorite daughter-in-law. I led her inside. The sound of her heels on the marble floor was like a hammer. Click, clack, click, clack. She walked into the living room. She didn't sit down. She inspected the furniture. She touched the velvet curtains. She looked at the family portraits on the wall. She was an invader. She wasn't a guest. Trevante came in behind her. He was carrying her heavy suitcases. He looked nervous. He kept glancing between us. He was a man caught between two worlds. The wife he was robbing, and the mother who taught him how to steal. We sat for tea in the sunroom. The sound of the rain started to drum against the glass. A low, constant hum. I poured the tea. My hand was steady. Eudora took a sip. She looked at the fine china. Then she looked at me. Her gaze was pitying. You know, Vianne, a big house like this, it feels so empty. She said, a house needs a family. It needs a legacy. It needs an heir. I felt my chest tighten. I knew what she was doing. She was laying the groundwork. She was thinking about Caliso's baby, the boy she believed would one day run this estate. I looked at her. I sipped my tea. It tasted like ash. We have been trying. Mother Eudora, I said softly. She let out a dry, sharp laugh. Some women are like the morning dew, beautiful but gone by noon. Others are like the soil, fertile, strong. The insult was quiet, but it was there. She was calling me weak. She was calling me a failure. I just smiled. I asked Trevante to take her bags to the guest room. I told her she needed rest. She agreed. She said the drive had been long. I offered to help her with her small handbag. She hesitated for a second. Her grip tightened on the handle. But then she let go. She thought I was this simple wife. She thought I was just being helpful. I carried the bag toward the guest room. It was heavy. It felt dense. I waited until I was inside. I waited until I heard the door to the bathroom click shut. I didn't hesitate. I opened the side pocket. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper. It was a receipt from a store called Bye Bye Baby. I pulled it out. My heart stopped. The date was 2 days ago. The location was Macon, the same day Trevante was supposedly at his mother's bedside. The items listed were a premium stroller, an electric breast pump, and a set of blue baby boy outfits. The total was over $3,000, paid in cash. At the bottom, the loyalty points were registered to Trevante's phone number. I felt a surge of pure, raw disgust. My husband had used the medicine money I gave him to buy a luxury lifestyle for his mistress's child, and his mother had been right there with him, picking out the clothes, celebrating the betrayal. I took out my phone. I photographed the receipt. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I put the paper back exactly where I found it. I walked out of the room. Eudora was standing by the window. She looked at the rolling green lawn of the estate. She didn't see me at first. She was whispering to herself. Soon, she said, soon we will have a prince in this palace. I cleared my throat. She jumped. She turned around. Her face was a mask of innocence once more. I told her the tea was getting cold. I told her Trevante was waiting for her. She nodded. She walked past me. Her lavender suit rustled like a snake in the grass. I watched her go. I felt the weight of the evidence in my pocket. The circle was complete. The husband, the mistress, and the mother. They were all in my house. They were all under my roof. And they were all waiting for $1 million that did not exist that evening. Dinner was a battlefield of silences. Trevante was euphoric. He was talking about the fund transfer. He was already planning a celebration. Eudora was nodding. She was encouraging him. They thought they were the predators. They didn't know I was the one holding the leash. I waited for the perfect moment. I waited until the dessert was served. Mother Eudora, I said, my voice was like ice. I saw the most beautiful baby boy outfit today in a magazine. It reminded me of something Trevante froze. Eudora's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The silence in the room became thick, suffocating. I saw the flash of panic in their eyes. They looked at each other, a silent, guilty communication. I just smiled. I took a slow bite of my cake. Is something wrong? I asked. The crystal chandelier above the dining table was a masterpiece of cold light. It hummed with a low, electric vibration, like a witness waiting to speak. The room smelled of expensive Pinot Noir and roasted rosemary lamb. It was a scent of wealth, a scent of security. But for the two people sitting across from me, the air was beginning to run thin. I watched Trevante through the flicker of the candlelight. His skin looked oily. A thin film of sweat was forming on his upper lip. He thought the heat was coming from the kitchen. He didn't realize it was coming from the lye burning in his chest. I cut into my meat with a slow, deliberate motion. The silver knife scraped against the fine bone china. A sharp, piercing sound that made Eudora flinch. She was trying to look regal. She was wearing her lavender suit and all that jingling gold. But her eyes were darting toward the foyer, toward the bag where she had hidden the evidence of her grandson's existence. I let the silence hang in the air, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I wanted them to feel the weight of every unsaid word. You seem quiet tonight, Trevante, I said. My voice was a soft whisper. It cut through the silence like a razor. He jumped. His wineglass rattled against the table. Oh, you know, he stammered, just thinking about the business. The liquidation. It is a big move. Vianne, $1 million is a lot of responsibility. I smiled. It was the smile of a predator. Sweet, empty, lethal. It is. I agreed. But luckily, I have a husband I can trust. Right, Trevante? He didn't look me in the eye. He took a long, desperate gulp of his wine. The Adam's apple in his throat moved up and down, a sign of fear. Eudora cleared her throat. Her jewelry clattered. We are family, Vianne. Family always looks out for each other. That is what Mother Eudora always says. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. It sounded like a moan. I looked at Eudora. She was chewing a piece of bread, her jaw moving like a rhythmic machine. I decided it was time to drop the first bomb. Speaking of family, I said, I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamed the nursery upstairs was full of blue balloons and little boy outfits. The color drained from Eudora's face. She looked like she had seen a ghost. A piece of bread fell from her hand and landed on the white tablecloth, like a stain. Trevante choked on his wine. A dark red spray hit his white silk tie. He coughed, his face turning a deep, angry purple. Blue, he gasped. Why blue? I shrugged. My shoulders felt light. I don't know, said. Maybe it was just a premonition. Or maybe it was that receipt I saw. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the steady, heavy rain drumming against the windows. It sounded like thousands of tiny fingers trying to get in. Trevante's eyes went wide. His pupils dilated. He looked at his mother. Her hands were trembling so hard the table began to vibrate. Receipt? Eudora whispered. Her voice was a dry, cracking sound. What receipt? I paused. I let the tension build until it was almost a physical pain. I watched the sweat drip down Trevante's temple. I saw the way his fingers gripped the edge of the table. He was a man on the edge of a cliff, and I was the wind. Oh, just a grocery receipt, I said. I must have misread it. I thought it said something about baby clothes, but I was so tired. It was probably just heart medicine. The relief that washed over them was visible. It was pathetic. They both let out a long, shuddering breath. They thought they had escaped. They thought the simple wife was back in her box. Trevante let out a forced laugh. It sounded like dry leaves. Yeah, baby, you're just stressed. The money. The mother, it is a lot. You need to rest. I nodded obediently. You're right, Trevante. I am so lucky to have you to handle everything, especially the paperwork for the house deed. I saw his eyes spark. Greed is a powerful drug. It erased his fear in a second. He leaned in, his voice becoming smooth. Greedy. Yes, the deed. We should move it to a safe location tomorrow. My father-in-law mentioned it. I can take it to the notary for you. To keep it safe, I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. He was walking right into the center of the web. I had spent the afternoon with a professional forger. The man was an artist. The document sitting in the safe upstairs was a masterpiece. It looked real. It felt real. It smelled of old paper and authority. But it was a death warrant if he pawned it. If he used it as collateral for his debts, he would be committing a felony, a high-level fraud. I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. The law would do the work for me. I looked at the chandelier. The light was beautiful. It was blinding. That sounds like a wonderful idea, said. I will give you the safe code tonight. Eudora smiled. Her teeth were yellow, like old ivory. That's my girl, she said. We are going to take such good care of you. I looked at her. I thought about the nursing home brochure I had tucked into Trevante's briefcase, the one I had signed with Caliso's handwriting. I wondered how Eudora would feel when she found it. I wondered how she would feel when she realized her perfect son and his mistress were planning to dump her in a sterile room the moment the money cleared. I stood up. My silk dress rustled against the chair. I feel much better now, said. I think I will go to the study. I have a few more plans to finalize. Trevante stood up too. He kissed my hand. His lips felt like a cold slug. He didn't see the disgust in my eyes. He didn't see the trap closing. He only saw the $1 million. He only saw the freedom. He didn't realize that in my world, freedom is something you earn. And he was about to pay the ultimate price. I walked toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I knew they were already whispering. I knew they were already celebrating. I reached the landing and looked down at them. They looked so small under the heavy crystal light, like insects under a glass. I went into the study and closed the door. I sat in the darkness. My father's old desk felt solid, protective. I picked up my phone. I sent a single text message to an anonymous number. The bait is taken, I wrote. Bring the storm. Trust is a fragile thing. It is easily broken. But suspicion is a poison that never stops growing. I held the brochure in my hand. It was glossy, cold. The edges were sharp. It felt like a weapon. On the cover, there were images of smiling seniors. They were sitting in a garden. The grass was too green. Their smiles were too forced. Sunset Pines Senior Living. A place for the forgotten. A place for the inconvenient. It was located miles away from the city. Isolated, quiet. Perfect for a woman like Eudora. I sat at the mahogany desk. The rain was drumming against the window. A rhythmic, persistent beat, like a hammer on a coffin. The study was dark. The only light came from a small desk lamp. It cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. I picked up a pen, a heavy silver fountain pen. My father's pen. I felt its weight. I felt the cold metal against my skin. I closed my eyes for a moment. I visualized Caliso's handwriting. I remembered the way she looped her letters, the way her Y always trailed off. I practiced on a scrap of paper, over and over, until it was perfect. Then I wrote on the margin of the brochure. The ink flowed smoothly, dark, permanent. The best option for Mom when we moved to the new house. I added a small heart, a touch of cruelty. It looked exactly like her work. I let the ink dry. The smell of the chemicals hung in the air. A sharp, bitter scent. I folded the brochure. I could hear the crinkle of the paper. It sounded like a secret being told. I stood up. My silk robe hissed against the floor. I walked toward the door. The house was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a house under siege. I crept down the stairs. Each step felt like a mile. The marble was cold under my bare feet, a biting chill that traveled up my spine. I reached the living room. The air smelled of fading lilies and Trevante's expensive, lingering tobacco. His briefcase was sitting on the sofa, a heavy black leather monster. It looked out of place in our home, like an intruder. I touched the latch. It was cold, metallic. I pushed it. Click. The sound echoed through the hallway. I froze. I listened for a heartbeat, for a breath, for a movement. Nothing. Just the rain. I slid the brochure inside. I placed it between the bank records and the fake deed. I wanted her to find it. I knew she couldn't help herself. Eudora was a scavenger. She lived for secrets. She lived for leverage. I closed the briefcase. I walked back to my room. My chest was tight. My heart was a frantic drum. I lay in the dark, waiting. I heard the clock in the hall strike 3, a deep, resonant chime. Then I heard it. A door creaking open downstairs, soft, stealthy footsteps on the rug. I knew it was her Eudora. She was looking for the $1,000,000 documents. She wanted to see her name in print. She wanted to feel the power of the Sterling wealth. I imagined her opening the briefcase. I imagined her fingers brushing against the glossy paper, the smell of the fresh ink, the rustle of the pages. I imagined her eyes finding the note. I imagined the blood draining from her face, the realization hitting her like a tidal wave. Her perfect son. Her ideal daughter-in-law. They weren't building a kingdom for her. They were building a cage. The silence of the house changed. It became jagged, tense. I heard a small, choked sound. A gasp of pure betrayal. It was the sound of a snake realizing it had been bitten by its own kind. I smiled in the darkness. My first psychological strike had landed. The alliance was cracked. The greed that bound them together was now the very thing that would tear them apart. Tomorrow morning, breakfast would not be served with smiles. It would be served with poison. I closed my eyes. The rain was still falling. A cold, constant wash. I felt a strange peace. The matriarch was back, and she was just getting started. I drifted into a light sleep. But even in my dreams, I could see Eudora's face, twisted with rage, clutching that brochure like it was a death warrant. The morning light was only a few hours away, and with it, the storm would finally break. I woke up to the smell of coffee, but it didn't smell like home. It smelled like a trap. I dressed slowly. A dark, tailored dress. I wanted to look like an authority. I walked into the dining room. Eudora was already there. She was sitting very still. Her hands were tucked into her robe pockets. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept a minute. She didn't look at me when I entered. She was staring at Trevante's empty chair. The tension was thick. You could taste it. It was metallic, like blood. I sat down across from her. "Good morning, Mother Eudora," I said. My voice was smooth, like velvet over a blade. She didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on something in her pocket. I knew what it was. The crumpled brochure. The evidence of her displacement. Trevante walked in a moment later. He was smiling. He looked euphoric. He looked like a man who had already spent the $1,000,000. "Morning, ladies," he said. He leaned down to kiss his mother's cheek. She flinched. She didn't just move. She recoiled, as if his lips were fire. Trevante frowned. "Something wrong, Mama? You look like you saw a—" Ghost Eudora finally spoke. Her voice was a low, dangerous hiss. "Don't lie to me, Trevante. I know that woman's handwriting. She wants to dump me in a hole. She wants to take the money and hide me away. And you were going to let her." I sat there, sipping my tea, watching the fire consume them. The alliance was dead. The betrayal had turned inward. And the best part? The absolute best part was that Calisto didn't even know she had started the war. The storm had arrived, and it was much colder than they ever expected. Trevante's face transformed. The joy was replaced by a sharp, ugly panic. He looked at me. His eyes were searching for an explanation. He wanted me to save him. He wanted me to tell him it was all a joke. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him with an innocent, empty gaze. I saw him reach for the brochure. His fingers were shaking. He was reading the note again. He was seeing the heart. He was seeing his future crumbling. He knew he was in a trap, but he didn't know I was the one who said it. Eudora stood up. Her jewelry jingled, a sharp, aggressive sound. "I won't stay here, Trevante," she said. Her voice was trembling with rage. "I won't stay in a house where I am being treated like an old piece of furniture. You find out what she is planning, or I will tell Vianne everything. I will blow this whole thing apart." She marched out of the room, her lavender suit rustling like dry leaves. Trevante was left standing there, holding the brochure. His world was on fire, and the worst was yet to come. Because tonight, Calisto was coming for dinner, and the two women he loved most in this world were about to tear each other to pieces. A pen is a silent witness. In the right hands, it is a lethal weapon. Tonight, it would be the instrument of Trevante's total destruction. The study was a sanctuary of shadows and secrets. It smelled of vanilla-scented candles and the cold, metallic scent of the safe. The air was heavy still, like the inside of a tomb before it is sealed. Trevante stood by the mahogany desk. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. His eyes were bloodshot. His expensive silk suit was wrinkled at the elbows. He was vibrating with a nervous, frantic energy. He needed the money. He needed it more than his next breath. The loan shark's threats were no longer a distant hum. They were a roar in his ears. I watched him from the shadows of the corner chair. I was the silent architect of his desperation. I saw him wipe his palms on his trousers, a repetitive, desperate motion. He looked at the safe. His eyes were hungry. He believed that behind those steel doors lay his salvation. He didn't realize it was actually his cage. I stood up. My dark silk dress rustled, a soft, hissing sound that made him jump. I walked toward the safe. The dial felt cool and smooth against my fingertips. Right, left, right. The mechanism clicked, a heavy, solid, final sound. I pulled out the manila envelope. Inside was the masterpiece, the forged deed to our Buckhead mansion. I had spent hours with an expert to ensure its perfection. The gold seal was embossed in heavy. The paper was 24-pound linen. It felt like authority. It felt like legacy. To any untrained eye, it was the title to our empire. But in reality, it was a counterfeit. A trap designed to snap shut the moment he tried to use it. Trevante reached for it. His fingers were trembling. He was like a starving wolf. I pulled it back just an inch. "You have to be careful, Trevante," I said. My voice was a soft, dangerous silk. "This is the only original copy. If you lose this, or if it gets damaged, the liquidation of the $1,000,000 will be delayed by months. My father is very strict about documentation." He nodded frantically. He was barely listening. He was staring at the seal. "I know, Vianne. I know." He whispered. His voice was cracked. "I just need to get the notarized valuation. For the bank. to ensure the transfer goes smoothly. He was lying. The lie was thick in the air, like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the loan shark. He was going to use a fake document as collateral for a very real, very dangerous debt. I handed him the pen. It was my father's heavy, silver rollerball. The ink was black, dark like a void. Sign here, I said. I pointed to the line for the primary guarantor. I watched him lean over the desk. The desk lamp cast a harsh, yellow light over his face. I saw the beads of sweat on his forehead. I heard the ragged, uneven sound of his breathing. He didn't even read the fine print. He didn't see the clause I had hidden in the legal jargon. A clause that stated this document was a secondary, non-legal filing. He didn't see the subtle errors in the property description. Errors that I had already registered with the police as signs of a forged document. By signing this, he wasn't securing a loan. He was creating the evidence of his own felony. The nib of the pen scratched against the heavy paper. A dry, rasping sound, like a shovel hitting dirt. He signed his name with a flourish. Trevante King. He felt like a king. He felt like he had just won the game. He blew on the ink to dry it. The scent of the bitter, metallic ink rose up between us. He looked at me and smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he had outsmarted the world. "Thank you, baby," he said. He tucked the envelope under his arm. He was already moving toward the door. He was in such a hurry to begin his new life with Caliso. He was in such a hurry to spend money that didn't exist. He didn't even notice that I didn't smile back. I followed him to the foyer. The rain was drumming against the front door. A steady, persistent rhythm. He grabbed his coat. He didn't look at his mother's room. He didn't look at me. He just walked out into the storm. I watched the taillights of his car disappear down the driveway. The red glow faded into the gray mist. I walked back into the study. The room felt lighter. I picked up the silver pen. It was still warm from his hand. I wiped it with a silk cloth, erasing his touch. I sat at the desk and picked up my phone. I dialed my father's private line. "It is done," I said. The words felt like a weight being lifted. "He has the forged deed. He is on his way to the creditors now." My father's voice was calm. "Good," he said. "The notary is already at the office. The cameras are set. Tomorrow morning, we hold the board meeting." I hung up the phone. I looked at the empty safe. The bait was gone. The predator was running straight into the trap. Trevante thought he was heading toward $1 million future. He didn't realize he was heading toward a decade in a cold, concrete cell. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The silence of the mansion was finally peaceful. But then I heard a sound. A soft, stealthy floorboard creaking upstairs. It wasn't Eudora. She was still sulking in the guest room. I looked toward the stairs. My heart began to beat faster. Someone else was in the house. Someone who shouldn't be here. I realized the game was even more dangerous than I thought. The air on the 55th floor is thin. It smells of ozone, expensive espresso, and the cold, sharp scent of a coming storm. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, looking down at the city of Atlanta. Below me, the world looked small, fragmented, just like the people sitting at the mahogany table behind me. The boardroom was a cathedral of judgment. It was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Steady, constant vibration that felt like a ticking clock. Trevante was sitting at the center of the table. He looked like a man who had already conquered the world. He was wearing his best charcoal suit. His skin was glowing with a greasy, arrogant sweat. He didn't know he was sitting on a trapdor dot to his right. Eudora sat like a queen in exile. Her lavender suit was vibrant against the sterile gray walls. Her gold jewelry clattered every time she moved. A nervous, sharp sound. And next to her, Caliso, my best friend, my betrayer. She was dressed in an oversized coat, trying to hide the life growing inside her. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the polished wood of the table. She looked at her reflection. She didn't realize she was looking at a ghost. The room felt heavy, suffocating. It smelled of high-end, toner, and the metallic scent of fear. My father entered a moment later. His footsteps were heavy, final. He carried the weight of a century of legacy. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He sat at the head of the table, the master of the house. He looked at Trevante. His gaze was cold, unyielding. It was a look of a man watching an insect under a glass. Trevante leaned forward. His voice was smooth, falsely humble. "Thank you for seeing us, Mr. Sterling. We are ready to finalize the asset transfer. For the family's future," said. He touched the manila envelope I had given him, the one containing the forged deed. He felt the weight of it. He felt the power of it. He thought he held the keys to the kingdom. My father didn't speak. He simply signaled to the notary. A dark blue folder was placed in front of Trevante. Trevante's hands were trembling as he opened it. I watched his face. I watched the way his eyes searched for the check, for the wire transfer confirmation. But the folder was empty. There was only a single blank sheet of paper, confused. Trevante looked up. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was a dry, cracking sound. My father leaned back. The leather of his chair creaked, like a warning. "Before we sign, we must verify the harmony of the beneficiaries," he said. His voice was like gravel over silk. He picked up a small, black remote. He pressed a button. The automatic blinds began to close. One by one, they blocked out the city. They blocked out the light. The room became a dark, sterile void. A large projector screen descended from the ceiling, a slow hissing sound that filled the silence. I saw Trevante smile. He thought this was a tribute. He thought we were going to watch a video of my childhood, a nostalgic. Weak gesture before the money arrived. The screen lit up with a blinding white light. Then an audio wave visualization appeared. It moved with the rhythm of a heartbeat. There was no image, only sound. The silence in the room became absolute. You could hear the shallow, frantic breathing of the traitors. Then the speakers roared to life. It was Trevante's voice, high definition, crystal clear. It filled every corner of the room. It echoed off the glass walls. "Just wait until that $1 million check from her daddy clears. I'm going to leave that simple-minded wife of mine with nothing." The sound of his own betrayal hit Trevante like a physical blow. He didn't just move. He recoiled. His chair scraped against the floor. A sharp, screeching sound. His face turned from charcoal to ash. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the screen as if it were an executioner. Then Caliso's voice followed. "That wife of yours is completely clueless, right, baby?" Her mockery was loud. It was sharp. It was undeniable. I watched Caliso. She jumped in her seat. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, reflecting the white light of the screen. She looked at me. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just watched her world burn. The recording continued. It played the laughter. It played the talk of the luxury mansion. It played the talk of the baby boy. It played Trevante calling my father a fossil. Every word was a nail. Every second was a hammer. Eudora looked like she had suffered a stroke. Her face was frozen. Her hands were clutching her lavender skirt so hard the fabric began to tear. The audio stopped. The click of the hang-up echoed in the silence. The lights came back on, blindingly bright. The room felt colder than before. Trevante was slumped in his chair. He looked small, pathetic. He looked like the trash he was. My father stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "There is no $1 million, Trevante," he said. The words were a death sentence. There never was. You were hunting a ghost. Trevante tried to stand. His legs were like water. He pointed at the screen. He shouted about deepfakes. He shouted about AI. He looked at me with a desperate, begging gaze. But then I opened my briefcase. I pulled out the brown envelope. I threw the sonogram of Caliso's baby onto the mahogany table. I threw the screenshots of their texts. I threw the photo of the baby store receipt. The evidence spilled out across the wood, real, physical, irrefutable. Trevante's lies were stripped bare. He collapsed back into his seat. The arrogance was gone. The king was dead. He looked at the forged deed in his hand. He realized it was worthless, but then the door to the boardroom opened. It wasn't security. It was a man in a black leather jacket. He didn't belong in this skyscraper. He smelled of exhaust and violence. He looked at Trevante and smiled. A crooked, gold-toothed grin. "Trevante," he said, "my boss is waiting for his payment. And we found out that deed you gave us is a fake." Trevante's eyes filled with a new, primal terror. He looked at the loan shark. Then he looked at me. He realized the trap wasn't just about the money. It was about his life. Fear has a very specific smell. It smells like sour sweat, cold adrenaline, and the metallic temps of a life about to end. Trevante was drenched in it. He sat in his leather chair, a man who had just seen his soul exposed on a projector screen. But the recording was only the beginning of his nightmare. The boardroom door swung open. A heavy, violent sound that didn't belong in a skyscraper. The man who walked in was a ghost from the world Trevante thought he had escaped. He was large, burly, dressed in a black leather jacket that smelled of exhaust and rain. He brought the grit of the Atlanta streets into our sterile, high-rise cathedral. His presence was a puncture wound in the room's expensive silence. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Trevante. His eyes were hard, like two black marbles. When he smiled, I saw a flash of gold, a crooked tooth that caught the overhead light. It was the smile of a wolf who had found a trapped sheep. The air in the room became thick, oily, the scent of high-end. Espresso was replaced by the smell of burnt rubber and stale cigarettes. This was Marco, the right hand of a man who didn't take kindly to being lied to. "Trevante," Marco said. His voice was a low, rasping growl. "My boss is a very patient man, but his patience just ran out." Trevante tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dry deck. He gripped the edge of the mahogany table. His knuckles were white. His skin was the color of wet cement. He looked at the manila envelope in front of him, the one containing the forged deed. Marco walked toward the table. His heavy boots thudded on the floor. Every step was a heartbeat. Every step was a warning. He picked up the envelope. He pulled out the document with the gold seal. He looked at it. Then he looked at Trevante. He laughed. It was a short, barking sound that echoed off the glass walls. "You think we're stupid, Trevante?" he asked. "You thought you could give us a counterfeit title. You thought you could secure a $100,000 debt with a piece of paper. You printed in a basement?" The room seemed to shrink. Eudora let out a small, choked cry. She clutched her lavender skirt. Her gold jewelry was silent now. She was frozen. Caliso moved closer to Trevante. Her eyes were wide with a primal, raw terror. She realized she had tied her life to a dead man. I watched them from across the table. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. They wanted a life of danger and greed. Now the danger had arrived, down below, on the street. I heard the roar of motorcycles, a rhythmic, thunderous vibration that traveled up the steel spine of the building. It was a symphony of karma. Marco leaned over the table. He pressed his palms into the wood. He smelled of grease and cold wind. "The deed is fake. Trevante, the collateral is zero. That means you lied to my boss and where I come from. A lie costs a lot more than $1 million. Trevante dropped to his knees. A pathetic, sudden movement. He crawled toward Marco's feet. He started to beg. His voice was a high-pitched, shaking mess. "I'll get the money, I promise. Vianne's father. He's liquidating the assets. Just give me one more day. I'll have the $1 million. Marco looked at my father. My father didn't flinch. He sat like a king watching a peasant. He simply shook his head. "There is no money, Trevante," my father said. His voice was a calm, final stone. "I haven't liquidated a single cent. You've been hunting a ghost." Trevante let out a sound, a long, low moan of absolute despair. He realized the trap wasn't just a legal one. It was a physical one. Marco grabbed Trevante by the collar of his expensive suit. He pulled him up until they were face to face. I saw Trevante's legs dangling, kicking at the air dot then. My mother, Eudora, screamed. She tried to stand. Her voice was shrill. "Please, he's a good boy. He'll pay. I'll give you my house." Marco didn't even look at her. He signaled to the door. 2 more men in leather jackets entered. They were silent. They were efficient. They didn't care about the high thread count carpet or the view of the city. They only cared about the debt. I stood up. My dark silk dress rustled. A soft, final sound. I walked toward the window. I looked down at the motorcycles waiting below. I felt the weight of my father's legacy behind me. I turned back to the room Trevante. I said, my voice was a soft, dangerous whisper. "You told me I was simple-minded. You told Caliso I was a stepping stone. Now, you're going to find out exactly where that stone leads." Marco started dragging Trevante toward the door. Trevante was crying. He was pleading with me. He called my name over and over. "Vianne, please. Vianne, save me." I just looked at him. My eyes were as cold as the glass behind me. I saw Caliso try to slip away. I saw her move toward the side exit. But my father's security team blocked her path. She was trapped in the debris of her own betrayal. Marco stopped at the doorway. He looked at Trevante and then at the men below. "We're taking him," he said to my father. My father nodded, silent. Permission of fate. Trevante's screams echoed in the hallway. They faded as the elevator doors closed. A heavy, metallic click that sounded like a coffin lid. Eudora collapsed onto the floor. Her lavender suit was a stain on the gray carpet. She was sobbing, calling out for her son. Caliso was sitting in a chair, her head in her hands. She was a broken, ruined thing. I walked over to the table. I picked up the forged deed. I looked at Trevante's signature. It was messy, frantic, just like his life. I looked at my father. He stood up. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong. "It is finished," he said. But I knew better. The loan sharks were just the first act of the storm. The sirens were already getting louder. The blue and red lights were starting to flash against the glass. The police were here for the fraud. The loan sharks were here for the blood. And in the middle of it all, Trevante was about to realize that some debts can never be paid. I looked at Caliso. She looked up at me. Her face was a mask of shame. "You're a monster," she whispered. I smiled. A slow, lethal smile. "No, Caliso," I said. "I am a matriarch, and I always protect the crown." The door opened again. But this time, it wasn't the street. It was the law. And the cuffs they were carrying were destined for a very different kind of wrist. Shame is a cold, heavy weight. It feels like the air before a winter storm. Caliso sat in the chair where she once dreamed of being a queen. Now she was just a common thief. The boardroom was still. The echo of Trevante's screams had finally faded. But the silence that followed was even more terrifying. It was a silence filled with the rhythmic, red and blue pulses of police lights. They flickered against the mahogany walls, like the heartbeat of a dying lie. The room smelled of spent adrenaline and the sharp, bitter scent of my father's expensive espresso. I stood by the window. My back was to the room. I could feel Caliso's gaze. It was a mixture of hatred and desperation. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow, ragged, the sound of someone running out of options. She was a cornered animal, and she was about to use her last, most desperate weapon. The door opened again. It wasn't the violent, heavy boots of the loan sharks. It was the measured, professional stride of the law. Two female officers entered the room. Their uniforms were crisp. Their faces were impassive. They carried the authority of the state and the cold, silver reality of justice. One of them held a pair of handcuffs. The light from the ceiling hit the metal. It glinted like a predator's tooth. The sound of the latch clicking as they prepared them was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Vianne, please," Kalisa whispered. Her voice was a thin, shaking thread. She clutched her oversized coat over her belly. "Think about the baby. This is Trevante's son. You can't do this. Not to an innocent child." She stood up. Her legs were trembling. She walked toward me. Her gold heels clicked on the floor. A desperate, hollow sound. She reached out. Her fingers were ice cold. She tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. I felt a surge of pure, raw disgust. I turned around slowly. I looked at her. My best friend, my sister, the woman who helped me pick out my wedding dress. I saw the tears in her eyes. They were real. But they weren't for the baby. They were for herself. They were for the life of luxury she was about to lose. She looked pathetic. A ruined masterpiece. The smell of her perfume was cloying, sweet like rotting lilies in a funeral parlor. It made my stomach turn. "I am thinking about the baby Kaliso," I said. My voice was a soft, dangerous silk. "I am thinking about how you planned to raise him on blood money. I am thinking about how you mocked my style, my life, my soul. While you were carrying his child, you didn't care about innocence when you were laughing at the recording. You didn't care about innocence when you were picking out blue outfits with my husband's mother. Why should I care about it now?" I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a new file. It was white, clean, lethal. I threw it onto the table. It slid across the wood and stopped right in front of her. "This isn't just about Trevante," I said. "I've been auditing the charity funds I entrusted to you. The shopping money, the shared accounts. You've been skimming off the top for years, Kaliso. $300,000 gone into your secret accounts. My father's accountants are very thorough. You were stealing from me before you ever started sleeping with my husband." Kaliso looked at the file. Her face went from pale to ghostly. She realized I hadn't just been watching her in Trevante. I had been watching her. All of her. The officer stepped forward. She took Kaliso's wrist. It was a firm, final movement. The first cuff closed with a sharp, metallic click. The sound of a door being locked forever. Kaliso let out a scream. A jagged, high-pitched sound that tore through the air. The air in the room seemed to freeze. I watched the metal bite into her skin. I smelled her panic. It was a sharp, metallic scent. She started to sob, a loud, hysterical sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "Please, Vianne, don't do this. I'm pregnant. You're a woman. You have a heart." She was on her knees now, the handcuffs clinking against each other. Her face was a mess of mascara and salt. "I do have a heart," I said. "That's why it hurt so much when you broke it. But a heart isn't a shield for a thief. You made your choice, Kaliso. You chose greed over loyalty. You chose a man who was ready to pawn a fake deed to save his own skin. Now you get to choose your cell." The officers pulled her to her feet. They began to lead her away. Her coat fell open, revealing the child she thought would be her golden ticket. It was a sight that should have broken me. But I felt nothing, just a vast, empty, cold dot. The boardroom felt hollow now. The lights outside continued to pulse, a rhythmic reminder of the chaos on the streets below. My father stood up. He walked over to the mahogany table and picked up the sonogram I had discarded. He looked at the tiny image, a life created in the middle of a lie. He didn't say a word. He just placed it back on the wood, like a piece of evidence in a closed case. "Vianne," he said. His voice was a low, gravely rumble. "You did well. You didn't let your emotions cloud your judgment. You acted like a Sterling." I looked at him. I felt the weight of his praise, but it felt heavy, like lead. I had destroyed my husband. I had sent my best friend to jail. I had humiliated my mother-in-law. I was the winner, but the victory tasted like copper, like blood. The silence hummed in the room, a low, constant vibration that made my teeth ache. The air in the room was stagnant. It smelled of old paper and the faint, lingering scent of Caliso's perfume. I walked back to the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a dark, bruised purple. The city lights were starting to flicker on, tiny sparks in the darkness. I thought about the house, the mansion in Buckhead. It was mine now, truly mine. But it would be silent. No more laughter. No more lies. Just the sound of the wind and the pillars and the ghosts of my mistakes. I heard the elevator chime, a soft, pleasant sound that didn't fit the mood. The doors slid open. My father's assistant walked in. She looked shaken. Her face was pale. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was trembling. "There is someone downstairs. They say they have the original deed." The real one? My father froze. I felt the air leave my lungs. We both looked at the forged deed on the table, the one Trevante had taken to the loan sharks. If the real one was downstairs, then someone had been playing a much longer game than I had. I looked at my father. His hands were clenched. His knuckles were white. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch. "Reaching for us. Who is it?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. It felt like the room was shrinking. The air was getting thinner. The assistant swallowed hard. Her eyes were wide with a new kind of fear. She didn't answer. She just stepped aside. And then I heard the footsteps. They weren't the heavy boots of a thug. They weren't the clicking heels of a mistress. They were the slow, deliberate steps of a man who owned the ground he walked on. A man I thought was buried 5 years ago. A man who held my family's entire future in his hands. Absolute zero is not just a temperature. It is a state of being. It is the moment when all movement stops. When the heart no longer burns with anger. When the soul no longer shivers with regret. It is the absence of everything. Most people think the opposite of love is hate. They are wrong. Hate is still fire. Hate is still energy. Hate means you still care enough to want them to suffer. The true opposite of love is indifference. It is the absolute zero of the human heart. I have reached that place, and it is the most beautiful, most peaceful place I have ever been. 6 months have passed since the storm in the boardroom. The seasons have changed. The heavy, oppressive heat of the Georgia summer has been replaced by a crisp, sharp autumn. The air smells of wood smoke and dried leaves. It is a clean scent, a scent of endings. I am sitting in my favorite outdoor cafe. The marble table is cold under my fingertips. I am drinking a cup of chamomile tea. The steam rises in a slow, hypnotic spiral. I watch it disappear into the wind, just like the ghosts of my past. I look at my hands. They are steady. The skin is no longer tight with anxiety. The white gold shackle of my marriage is gone. In its place is a simple emerald ring, my birthstone, a symbol of my own life. Reclaimed, I feel the weight of the silence around me. It is not empty. It is full of my own strength. I am no longer waiting for a car door to slam. I am no longer listening for a lie. I am finally, truly alone. And I love it, but miles away. In a place where the air smells of industrial bleach and old metal. Someone is thinking about me. Trevante is sitting in a cell that is 6 feet wide. The walls are gray, cold, concrete. They are damp with the moisture of 1,000 regrets. He spends his days staring at the heavy steel door, waiting for a sound, waiting for a letter, waiting for a voice that will never come. He is gaunt now. His expensive silk suits have been replaced by rough, orange fabric. It scratches against his skin, a constant, itching reminder of his failure. He remembers the mansion. He remembers the way the sunlight used to hit the Persian rugs. He remembers the smell of my perfume, lilies and power. He remembers the 60 seconds of the silent line. He replays that recording in his head every single night. Not because he is sorry for what he did, but because he is sorry he got caught. That is the nature of a predator. They only feel pain when they become the prey. He is a king without a kingdom. A man who traded a diamond for a handful of sharp rocks. I know he tried to call. The prison phone is a heavy, black plastic thing. It smells of 100 other desperate men. I can imagine his fingers trembling as he dials my number. The number he used to call to tell me he was coming home early. The number he used to call to tell me he loved me while he was sitting in a hotel room with Caliso. I can hear the rhythmic, electronic pulse of the ringing. 1, 2, 3. He holds his breath. He hopes for a miracle. He hopes that I am weak. He hopes that the simple-minded wife is still there, waiting to forgive him. But the phone doesn't ring in my world. It only vibrates. A soft, distant hum that I choose to ignore. I look at the screen. I see the area code, the mark of the cage. I feel nothing. No surge of anger. No sting of tears. Just a vast, absolute zero. I remember the way he kissed my forehead. I remember the way he laughed at my father's ethics. I remember the way he looked at the forged deed. I think about the loan sharks. I think about the debt he can never pay. And I sip my tea. The debt of betrayal is not paid in dollars. It is paid in the long, silent hours of the night. It is paid in the realization that you have become a ghost in your own life. Trevante is dead to the world. His name is a black mark in every business circle in the city. My father made sure of that. His mother, Eudora, is a ghost, too. She lives in that small town, dragging her paralyzed leg across a dusty porch. She waits for a son who is never coming back. She cries for a life she burned down with her own greed. I sent her a final package last month. It wasn't money. It was a photo of the Buckhead mansion. Under the new management dot, and then there is Caliso, my sister, my betrayer. She lives in a room that smells of dampness and cheap laundry soap. The roof leaks when it rains. A steady, pitiful drip that sounds like her own regrets. She holds a baby boy who looks exactly like the man who destroyed her. Every time she looks into that child's eyes, she sees the betrayal. She sees the boardroom. She sees the handcuffs of shame. She works as a cleaner. Her hands, once soft and manicured, are now rough, red, chapped from the chemicals she stole from me. And now, life is stealing from her every single day. I am not cruel. I am just a matriarch. I understand that for an empire to survive, the rot must be cut out completely, without hesitation. I have cleaned the dust from my life. I have fortified the gates. My father is proud. He looks at me and sees a woman who can lead, a woman who knows the value of loyalty and the price of deception. We don't speak of them anymore. They are like old, broken furniture, moved to the basement of our memories. The sun is starting to set over the city. The sky is a bruised, beautiful purple. It looks like a painting. I feel the cool breeze against my face. I stand up from the table. My dark coat is heavy, warm. It feels like armor. I pick up my phone. The screen is still glowing with the missed call. I don't delete it. I don't look at it. I go into the settings. My movements are slow, deliberate, hypnotic. I find the number. I find the name that once meant everything to me. Trevante King. I press the button. Block. The screen changes. The name disappears into the list of the forgotten. It is the final, absolute zero. The line is cut. The connection is severed. He is now truly, totally alone. He can shout into the void. He can beg the concrete walls. He can cry to the dark ceiling of his cell. But I will never hear him. I will never see him. I will never even think of him again. I walk toward my car. The engine purrs to life. A smooth, powerful sound. I drive through the city lights. I look at the skyscrapers. I see the office building where it all ended. It looks like a pillar of salt in the distance. I don't look back. I drive toward the mansion. My home, my sanctuary. The lights are on in the foyer. The white pillars are glowing in the moonlight. They look like the ribs of a giant, protecting the heart of the estate. I enter the house. The air smells of lilies and peace. I walk up the stairs. I don't look at the guest room. I don't look at the study. I go to my room and close the door. I lie in the center of my bed. The silk sheets are cool, inviting. I listen to the silence. It is a beautiful song. A song of a woman who won. A song of a matriarch who took back her crown. I close my eyes and drift into a deep, dreamless sleep. I am safe. I am whole. And I am finally, truly free.